Hello and welcome to Ink vs. Algorithm, the Writer's Pod. I'm your writer and host, Mookie Spitz. And as we duke it out with the bots, humans versus the LLMs in the war of slop, I would love to share a sloppy, very human tale. Back to my college days, DAZE, called Doctor's Orders. My harrowing tale of getting the clap in college. This one dovetails off my recent podcast about Frank Zappa, Friedrich Nietzsche, and all of us needing a little bit more cheapness. The key takeaway there was cringe and even outright failure are the stuff of artistic legend. At the very least, make for some really good writing and hopefully some fun reading, and in this case, listening. I guess the thesis should be self-evident. The proof, as it were, is in the pudding. Let's give this one a whirl. Put your hands on your head, he said with a distinct Southern accent. I complied. Now drop your britches. I complied. I said, put your hands on your head, son, he repeated. How can I pull my pants down if my hands are on my head? I asked, really wanting to know. You should have asked her that question before she got you into this predicament. I pulled my pants down, then rapidly put my hands back on my head, hoping he wouldn't notice the momentary lapse. The campus physician couldn't have cared less and got to work, without further ado, slipping a needle into the tip of my penis. Ah! I screamed, reflexively reaching down to my flaring cock. Boy, shouted the doc, looking up at me with stern eyes and a grinning face. Take your hands off your dick and put them back on your head. I complied. Didn't I just tell you to keep your hands on your head? You did. Then why didn't you? Because you just slipped a needle into my dick. You can thank her for that later. Her name was Paula, and she was a junior at California State University, Northridge. We were introduced by Ava, my boss at the pizzeria where I worked, as a way to keep me away from her voluptuous girlfriend, Dana. I ended up getting Dana pregnant and getting a venereal disease from Paula, so I guess it all balanced out. The coup de grace was the earthquake that hit the city a few years later, killing nearly 60 people and causing over $20 billion in damage. I couldn't recall the exact moment I caught chlamydia from Paula because we fucked constantly over the month or so that we dated and never used protection. She described herself as full-figured, which meant she had big tits and a body that turned me on. A bit of a control freak, especially in bed, she would pull her panties down, spread her legs, and direct traffic from there. I wasn't allowed to eat her out. She never climaxed or blew me, but she encouraged me to come inside her. I'm on the pill, she informed me on our first date, as if that magically shielded us from diseases, too. The oral contraceptives apparently didn't shield me from the other guys banging her either. The logistics were complex and clearly not considered every time I ejaculated with impunity inside her, Nobody keeping score except my penis, which began screaming bloody murder one morning when I peed. Much to our mutual astonishment, we didn't break up after I told her she gave me the clap. Who did you have sex with before me? She asked immediately, deflecting. Who else are you having sex with now? I fired back, figuring by that point I had nothing to lose. I've had it before, she replied dismissively, like she was talking about seasonal allergies. The meds are such a pain in the ass. We were advised by our respective medical professionals to avoid sex for the full week of antibiotic treatment. By day 3, she was in my bed again, naked from the waist down, legs spread, violating doctor's orders as casually as ordering takeout. Of course, we broke up right after we both tested negative again. None of this came as much of a surprise to me except for Paula's abrupt pivot from wanting to marry me to discarding me like college fuckboy trash. I discovered the true absurdity of the entire situation months later when Ava filled in the blanks. She thought you were it, Ava told me, like the guy. She expected you to propose eventually. Get out of here, I guffawed. You've got to be kidding. I shit you not, grinned Ava. She thought you were a nice Jewish boy, plowed her well enough, and didn't mind that she was fat. That's all it took? Check, check, check. Then why was she fucking half of Fullerton, California? Last hurrah, pal, advised Ava. She figured you two would marry soon, so she had to sow her oats before settling down with you. I'm gonna barf, I winced. We dated for like a month. All of her friends were getting married. That's it? That's plenty. Then why did she suddenly lose interest? I think she bailed the second you didn't scream at her for giving you the clap. Why? I really wanted to know. Was that a test? Beats me, shrugged Ava. Maybe you didn't seem jealous enough. Maybe you didn't seem angry enough. Maybe you seemed too calm, especially after the college doctor made you put your hands up and surrender. I'm a nice Jewish boy, remember? And you apparently love to fuck fat chicks too, stared Ava, an implicit warning. Who knew, I said, trying to change the subject. What a fun little story! I remember it like yesterday. Another part of this story was when living with Ava and her hot, voluptuous girlfriend, Dana, I met the future world famous singer and songwriter, Grammy Award winning Beck, who was squatting in an apartment in the apartment complex or the condo complex where Ava, Dana, and I were living at the time in Reseda, California, in the valley, the San Fernando Valley. So this is a part of that whole phase of life, which was kind of crazy, kind of wild, and fairly typical collegiate, post-collegiate, semi-collegiate, early 20s, self-discovery, young, dumb, and full of cum kind of stuff. The pizzeria where Ava and I worked actually got robbed once a month, and it's no exaggeration. This was the mid-ish 1980s. And that's a whole separate story right there. We used to do cocaine on the job. So we would snort cocaine off the countertop in between rolling calzones. That's another little tidbit from the 80s in Valley girl and boy, Southern California. And I'm dying to write more of these stories. And hearing myself read them, however half-assed the job I'm doing with it, is part of the fun too. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Not the chlamydia or getting berated by an angry, jealous lesbian here. But this is fun stuff. And I'm really thinking about turning it into its own little novella or series because there was so much going on. And the tragic part of this is that the underbelly leads right into my mother's suicide at this time. So there's this veneer of collegiate bullshit and sexual shenanigans. And the clock was ticking on my poor mother, who had suffered from postpartum depression since I was born and never got over it. Postpartum depression since I was born. I guess that's redundant, but the non redundant part is just never really shaking it. Obviously, it was more complicated than just a biochemical, hormonal post pregnancy thing. My mother was in a strange land. She didn't really speak the language. It was her second emigration. She realized she married an asshole. She lost all of her friends. Her daughter was left behind in Caracas, Venezuela. So there's a tragic, a deeply tragic, traumatic underpinning to a lot of these sexcapades and shenanigans. And that's juicy stuff too. And hearing myself even talk about this motivates me even more to eventually get this on paper and eventually get this on another pod too. There's a lot to dive into here. This is another point that I brought up in my Zappa Nietzsche rant recently, that as we get older, we're able to reminisce not only with impunity, but with authority. Life kicks all of our asses, the stuff they don't teach you in school. The other thing they don't teach you in school is that if you're smart about this, maybe even an extra little dose of selfish about this, you get to extract a lot of value from the inevitability of the suffering that life throws at you. And that icing on the cake of existential angst is processing this in the reminiscence and overcoming it in the sense that it is juicy, juicy stuff for wonderful storytelling. Every part is a good part because all the parts are cringy. They're simultaneously funny and disappointing, annoying. Like watching a car wreck, you feel that something is violative here. You're watching someone else suffer. You're helpless to really do much about it, but you feel obligated to maybe risk your own life and limb to do what? You don't really know. So then you just kind of sit back and watch. That's its own kind of cringe. It's the emergent phenomena, getting all this on paper, sharing your story, reading it aloud, and then sharing it to the world in the way that it resonates in the hearts of your audience. And they themselves can't help but start to reminisce about their own cringe. That's the power of this kind of humor and storytelling, I really think. It opens all of us up. When you see a stand-up comedian who's really, really good, they usually dive in deep and they share the truth in a way that's excruciatingly funny. And I think good writers do this too. And you can't help but be moved by it. The laughter itself is its own catharsis, but it really hits you after the fact. You feel like a changed person after seeing a great stand-up routine or reading a good story. Something inside you has connected with the material, with the person revealing themselves in this way. And that's liberating. If nothing else, you might feel a little bit forgiven. That yeah, you fucked up too. You've got your own skeletons, the things you can't fess up to. But it's all okay, because this fool, this hunger artist, this exhibitionist could laugh it off. And you laughed with them. You even laughed at them. And that made you feel better for a little while until it ricochets back and you realize, shit, you're probably just as bad. It's just so liberating. Most Western religions and even philosophies have this idea of original sin. And I've ranted before about this idea that people are just shitty. When you live amongst your own and you look at yourself in the mirror, you can't help but feel compounded by just how selfish, narcissistic, greedy, short-sighted, and stupid everybody is, including and especially yourself. It's so disappointing. Friendships, romances, business partnerships. It's the Schopenhauer thing that life is just inherently disappointing. All roads lead to a maudlin shrug and grimace. So, on top of that, we try to give it a little transcendence. Jesus came down from heaven, suffered, and died again for our sins. God is empathetic. And Jesus didn't come down to party, throw a rave. He came down to be tortured to death. And that's again because it's an acknowledgement of just how shitty other people are and how hard life is. And that's built on the bedrock of Judaism, where God isn't even corporeal. A burning bush, the pillar of salt, the lightning. You can't imagine who the hell this guy is. You can't imagine him. It's inconceivable. It's the Ein Sof R, the infinite negative light of the Kabbalah. God is just so damn far away. The universe is so very, very big. Nobody gives a shit. So Jesus rectified that, became empathetic, but it's still all about sin and suffering and maybe redemption. All that shittiness. So that's the heavy-handed approach, I think, to what cheapness solves, which is, yeah, we're all selfish, we're all a bunch of assholes, but out of that cauldron comes great art. That's the Nietzsche component, which is quit your bitching and drop your linen. Don't feel pity for your fellow man because they don't deserve it. And who are you to give it? And revel not only in the sweetness and light of the Apollonian reason, and don't only just get naked, drink wine, and dance around with the Dionysian free spirit, but overcome yourself, do the Ubermensch thing, like Zarathustra, to the point where you can come down off the mountain. And you're not so much going to share wisdom as you're going to share your own cringe. You're going to share your own cheapness with that sense of release. And that's really what art is. And the moral foundation of it is ambiguous, ambivalent, and sometimes contradictory. It's not about right or wrong or good or evil, truth or beauty or justice for that matter. It's really the cringe, it's the cheapness, it's the release. It's an amalgamation of all these things. And I guess it just boils down to energy, thermodynamics, complex to messy, systems breaking down. As Thomas Pynchon wrote, the paranoia rushing in because we just don't know. We don't even know what we don't know. And then we take a big toke of that joint, inhale deeply, and freak the fuck out. And that might be the closest thing that you and I and anyone else have toward any sense of transcendence. And along the way, put your hands on your head, take them off your dick. Because one way or another, the needle's going in, and you know what? You deserved it. Thanks for listening. I've inspired even myself to continue this series from this time. And it does make me think about my mom. I think there's a lot more to dive into. You know, as a side note, I can't help but bring up my abhorrence to genre and convention. Bringing up Nietzsche and frankly Frank Zappa again. I'm inundated by a lot of science fiction and fantasy writing, for one, just because I've got the other podcast. I get press releases from presses, from publishing houses, new author, old author. And I read the synopses of these books, and I feel like they're an exercise in prompt jockeying a bot. I'm looking for something original. I'm looking for something fresh. And usually that comes from genre mixing, genre blending. I had a refreshing experience with Matt Whitten's 51%. And I'm that specific because that is a book from an author. He's got a background in TV writing for 16 years or so. He wrote for Homicide, CSI Miami, the TV show Jag. So he's good with dialogue, and he's got the crime drama, the procedural, detective, TV stuff. And here he takes a crack at science fiction in this dystopian near future novel where corporations take over everything, but with zing. And I liked it because it finally broke the mold. And that's what I like about stories like this, too, the little cringy vignettes. Part memoir, extrapolated roman à clef, looking back, and not just storytelling for storytelling's sake, like mad libbing in the characters and the situations, writing a good book that a developmental editor would nod their head about, crossing out the adverbs in any kind of internal state, but just writing from the heart and accessing a vocabulary that part of which you create, and an approach to genre of which you're borrowing from the various ones that suit the story instead of suiting the story to these tropey, ropey, tired conventions. But I digress. Thanks for listening. I'm eager to pen more of these. I'll be back soon. Thank you.